Hello, Haiku here for another Historic Pauper deck tech. I believe I have done a deck tech for Grixis Gargantua in the past, or maybe it was I just played it in Midweek Magic and I kind of explained a little bit of the deck. But the deck has got a lot of good goodies added with recent sets, so I'm gonna take it out for a spin today for the Historic Pauper tourney. Hosted by the MTGA Daily Challenge Discord. It's always a good shout out to them. They generally have the Pauper tourneys on Wednesdays. It's a difficult time for if you're based in the Americas. It's also kind of a difficult time if you're based in Europe because it occurs quite late over there most of the time. So mostly for people that have Wednesdays off is kind of where it's kind of appeals to, unfortunately. But during the summer, I got a lot more free time, so I've been able to play in all of these. So let's talk about the deck. So I sort of kind of had this evolution where I went from playing with Breathless Knight's deck to try to see if Unearth is a thing, to then moving into so that was Orzhov or black white deck. Then I moved into red black, kind of getting into the power of Faithless Looting combined with those black reanimation cards. And then basically I became more and more impressed with Faithless Looting as a card. And so this is the big addition that this archetype has gotten recently. The sideboard also gets a big upgrade as well, but getting Faithless Looting and then Essence Flux with the release of Shadows of Innistrad plus the Shadows of the Past cards, which is Faithless Looting got downgraded to a common. So so the basic of the deck is it. So with Faithless Looting, you want to be red based, and so you have this tension between playing Faithless Looting and playing with Lorien Revealed and with Mystic Sanctuary. So Mystic Sanctuary Lorien Revealed is a very strong combo. I was playing some Grixis control decks using that combo before. And so when you want to abuse Faithless Looting, you need a lot more red. And so you can't quite have enough islands to be really consistently getting your Mystic Sanctuaries online. Or it's tougher. So I decided to go all in on red. And so I have I've just decided not to play in this style of deck, Lorien Revealed and Mystic Sanctuary. And instead, I'm using the synergy between the indestructible artifact lands and Cleansing Wildfire and Geomancer's Gambit to ramp you faster. So this deck is pretty mana hungry, and so the ramp is nice. And the ramp with card advantage, right? It ramps you and draws a card. Rampant Growth, draw a card. This is Rampant Growth, but it comes into comes into play untapped, and you draw a card. So, but you obviously want it on 2 mana more than you want on 3 mana, but 3 mana is fine. So that's why you see that there's just one less of the Gambits. I don't want to go too hardcore into this zone. So they also help with the mana fixing, which is nice, and they just help get you up to the critical 4 mana. He's at 4 mana. What you want to be doing is having a Gargantua in the yard, unearthing it, and being able to Essence Flux it after attack. So you get in for 5 damage. You lose 1 life, draw a card. You get in for 5 damage, and then you can blink it, bring it back into play untapped for blocking, and you get a draw card and lose another life again. So it's a pretty efficient card draw engine. It puts 5/4 into play on turn 4 with haste. It attacked with haste too. So it's and it drew you 2 cards. You had to spend 2 cards, but it drew you 2 cards. So how do you get the First-Sphere Gargantua in the yard? Well, that's where Faithless Looting comes into play. Obviously, I've talked about it with the Rakdos build of Madness. Is you have this issue where you don't have a lot of mana after you play your discard outlet to also use your Madness cards. So you do want something that you can discard for value and not have to pay mana into it to cast the Madness part. So the ideal like turn 2 play is you Faithless Looting, discard a First-Sphere and a Fiery Temper, bolt something on the opponent's side, or turn 3 you can Faithless Looting into Terminal Agony or and a First-Sphere, because you don't really get a lot of turns where you can madness out 2 cards. It does happen, and that feels great when you do madness out 2 cards, but having this as another discard outlet that you want in the yard, so you want to be discarding it, is pretty nice. So I have the full 4 Faithless Lootings, and then you do need more than Faithless Looting since it's only 4 cards, so even though you can recast, once you find one, you're like golden, because you can recast it again, and that generally finds the other Faithless Lootings, but you need more discard outlets to start. So I've talked about how this is basically Fable of the Mirror Breaker for Pauper, for Historic Pauper. It's it gives you a body at the end of the thing. Obviously the body is not as good as Fable of the Mirror Breaker's body that can copy, or Reflection of Kichiki, but it does the second stage of Fable over 2 turns, which is nice. And obviously you don't get the initial creature. It's not as good as Fable, but it's a very strong card. A 2/3 flyer is a pretty reasonable blocker, and it also can beat down pretty well. So it gives this deck a little bit of, because you're chunking in for 5 damage. So a couple attacks with the Modern Age, a couple Fiery Tempers to the face, or after sideboarded games, Alms of the Veins to the face, and you have the win. So rounding out, so basically that kind of locks in Essence Flux, Faithless Looting, Modern Age, a couple Madness spells, which are these, your ramp spells, and your payoff is First-Sphere Gargantua, and then all of the other stuff is spells, so that's why I comboed it with Tolarian Terror. So basically these are the good payoffs in blue. And Essence Flux is obviously a payoff. So you could go into white for Cloud Shift, which is basically the same thing since I don't have any spirits in the deck. And so Cloud Shift can do, but blue gives you this card and Tolarian Terror, which is much better than anything that white can give you. And then you also have the combo of evoking Mulldrifter and Essence Fluxing it, so basically like scam decks work. But the fact that you always have to pay the 3 mana to get this started, it's actually pretty mana intensive for the format. Obviously, if you get it off, if you get the combo going, drawing 4 cards and getting a 2/2 into play is awesome, especially later in the game. It just refills your hand. Puts a clock in play and stuff like that. But it's not too good early. And so that's why it's only a 1 of. I've cut it down. I try to play with the full 4 of. You're just too top heavy. This is basically a 4 mana play. And then the Tolarian Terrors are a later game. They only cost 1 mana, but you do have to play them later. And then Mulldrifter doesn't play well with Tolarian Terror, since it's a spell, but it's counts as a creature. So it doesn't play that as well. So you don't want to play too many Mulldrifters. And then I just round out the deck with some Fire Impulses for removal and Undercity's Embrace to utilize my 2 5-power creatures, even though I only need 4 power creatures, to gain some life back as well. And the nice part is with the Modern Age and with Faithless Looting, you can really dig and find your Undercity's Embrace, your Unexpected Fangs to put on these cards to get back into the game. Now, it's good in a kind of a more normal match, but against a really dedicated burn deck, you do have to have some better plan. And so I was really hesitant because I hate this card and especially in a control deck, because it really is just card disadvantage. It plays into the trope, right? Life gain doesn't do anything. Life gain is a trap for new players. But unfortunately, this deck, or not unfortunately, the way that this deck is currently built, you will win the long game. Even against counter-based strategies, you have enough card advantage between your kind of madness kind of getting you pseudo card advantage, these ramp cards giving you pseudo card advantage where you get lands into play. So you play well against control decks. You can sometimes even double spell a turn or triple spell sometimes. So you would put a lot of pressure on counter-based decks, and non-counter-based decks obviously struggle with the card advantage of your creatures and your other card advantage spells. So I think it's so the weakness of this deck is getting run over by aggro, and so that's where you can sacrifice a little bit of card advantage. It's mostly to gain 3 life. It's not really, you don't really care about the lose 3 life. Although, again, this having haste, you do kind of turn the corner pretty quickly compared to most control decks, where, you know, putting in a 5/4 with haste attacking in is a pretty big game most of the time. So you can put a lot of pressure on the opponent. So sometimes it combos with the life loss, but mostly it's just for life gain. So basically you turn 2, Faithless Looting, discard one of these, and maybe a Swiftspear into the yard. So you're just kind of cycling through your cards a little bit, and you gain some incidental life. The big life gain that I want to rely on is trying to combo my 8 4 power or more creatures with Undercity's Embrace to gain 4 life. I think that is a more consistent plan against decks, but this is kind of to tide you over to get to that end game where you have a 5 power creature in play. This deck, the unfortunate part of this deck is compared to a Cauldron Familiar. Cauldron Familiar plays around Relic, which is really the only good graveyard hate in Historic Pauper. It plays around it very, very easily. I did have that one misplay where I just kind of just mind blanked and just ran right into the Relic, but most of the time you can time when you sack the food to bring back the Cauldron Familiar pretty well. This deck is weaker to graveyard hate because you can't do this at instant speed. And the opponent can respond to you paying the unearth cost, removing the creature, so it's a double whammy. So you do need to play some hate for Relic. The card that I found that does what I want it to do is Abrade. Actually, I just thought of another card that I can do. I forgot how it deal 1 damage artifact. I think that will bring it up. So I can kind of get rid of the end of the festivities and play. The suspense is so great. Let's see if it came up. Smash to Dust. That's what it's called. So let's cut end of festivities and play 5 stars to dust. All right. Okay, so a little bit explanation of the rest of the cards in the sideboard. Annul is just a very efficient counter. There's a lot of enchantments that are very important to remove. So Ethereal Armor is one. Opposing Modern Ages is another one, although it's debatable. I think I got punished citing an Annul just for Modern Age. There's also Okiba Reckoner Raid. Is another important enchantment. So there's a few. I've cut down now to 1. I used to play a lot more. And the nice part about this deck is with the Essence Flux, you play really well against enchantment-based removal, so you don't really need that much and Annul. Actually, I think I've just convinced myself that I'm going to cut this one as well. Do I want to play the last Alms of the Vein over Annul? Or maybe I want to play another Negate. Sorry about the lag. The computer decided to update right before the tournament, so I'm just trying to finish all the updates. So yeah, let's cut Annul and let's play more of a hedge against aggro. And then, well, the computer kind of catches up on its thinking. Whereas the cards Fiery Impulse, I think it's just a necessary evil against ninjas. And I generally want the full 4 of. You could play Frostbite as well, although it's a lot worse in this deck because you don't have as many snow lands. I'm just playing the slow lands to potentially scare someone into thinking that I might be playing them. Relics, obviously, for opposing graveyard decks. I like always to have 2 since 1 can't really clear graveyard, so you end up sacking it, where you generally want to keep it in play because you don't want to exile your own graveyard. So the ability of 2 to be going at once is fine, and just makes it more likely to draw the first one. Glorious Gale just as an essence scatter. I think it's just a conceit, and Negate as another conceit to some random control decks that you might want it. Also, I guess against the impulse decks, you probably side this in as well. And then, so you saw my change from Smash of Dust. I wanted a thing to deal 1 damage to creatures to sweep up if someone plays like a white weenie deck with a lot of the ETB draw card. So it's not a white weenie deck, I guess. It's a white value, mono white value deck. Has a lot of 1 toughness creatures, so this can kind of punish that. But also it has utility as a destroy artifact. And Abrade is kind of similar to Smash of Dust, where it has utility against aggro, but then it also can kill opposing Relic of Progenitus. And then you saw I went up to the full 4 Alms of the Vein. Again, I just want to draw this card as soon as possible to stall against burn decks. This might be going a little bit over ham, but I think this deck is really well set up in the late game, and so my biggest concern is getting to the late game. So I think this plan of having 4 to dig, combined with my 8 discard outlets, will allow me to get it played. Last thing, and then Undercity's Embrace, obviously against hexproof. And again, it's a life gain spell once you get out the 5 toughness creatures. So Unexpected Fangs is nice because you can put it on Modern Age or a Mulldrifter if you need to. Generally, it's going to end up going on a Modern Age. Obviously, if you can get it on these big creatures, you would love it on one of those. But Undercity's Embrace does something before you get the 5 toughness creature into play. So it's sometimes better, sometimes worse. So I like that it has utility against hexproof. And it also is just like a removal spell for big creatures too. It's just fine. So generally, if a opponent's playing a bunch of big creatures, they don't have a bunch of small creatures to sack alongside of it. It plays around protection spells in green and white. So like hexproof, so the Snakeskin Veil and the Lorian's Revealed, this plays around. So it's kind of nice in that sense too. And then the mana base, obviously you need to play a bunch of bridges. I came at 10. You definitely want to play all the red bridges because when you have these cards, you want the mana to be able to cast it, which needs red, and a bridge in play. So that's why you favor red. And then 9 wasn't quite enough to consistently always have a bridge when you have your ramp spell. Obviously, it's not a ramp spell if you don't have your bridge in play. So it's you really want the bridge. So I've cut down to only 1 Maestros Theater because it's just a lot of tap lands. This is 1 Bojuka Bog, 2, 10, 12 tap lands out of 22. So it's more than half the lands are tapped. So turn 1, you generally play a tap land. And then turn 2, you want it to be untapped so you can do Modern Age or Cleansing Wildfire or Faithless Looting into a Madness spell. And then on turn 3, you're playing another tapped land. So there's a lot of tap lands, and definitely slows the game down. And I think that's why you end up having to play this kind of plan in the sideboard. Again, it feels bad, but it's a necessary evil if you want to get to the end game against an aggro deck. That pretty much covers it. Hopefully, I do well enough. And I love that they're doing finally some extended rounds of Swiss. So as long as it's 4 rounds, as long as you don't lose the first round of Swiss, you're still live, even if you get a loss in the subsequent rounds. So that's kind of nice, if it's 4 rounds or more. Other than that, hopefully I do good. Hopefully you enjoy the games. Yeah. And then I will be making a discussion forum post. So if you wanted to chime in about your experiences playing the deck or any cards that you would like to play, there's plenty of people who have played this combo, First-Sphere with Essence Flux or any other Blink spell. And then it pairs nicely generally with Tolarian Terror. And they also play it with Madness Enablers. I think I'm the only one who's really playing this plan with the Cleansing Wildfire, and I really went hardcore into it with 7 cards. We'll see if that pays off. One nice thing is I do have a couple 1-mana spells in Fiery Impulse where you can use this 1 extra mana. That's the one downside of this card is it costs an extra mana, but then you get the mana back afterwards. But there's not a lot of things that you can spend it on, so that's why I tended to I'm trying to fit more fiery impulses just as early answers and a way to utilize that extra mana. Yep. I guess you could potentially cut one more of these for a fire impulse, but I think the ramp is more important than the initial removal. You have a good amount of removal, and your creatures are big enough that you don't always care about opposing creatures. And then the sideboard can kind of address any kind of weakness there. All right. Bye-bye.